In our business, things go wrong every day because it's such a subjective business.
Yeah. How do you talk to employees when something doesn't land or clients unhappy?
We're not afraid to have bad meetings. I think what happens in companies all over the world is that when they have success, they kind of freeze. You have to always be able to reinvent. In the end, this is a company that's about ideas.
Welcome to This Is Working, where leaders share their strategies for success and the lessons that shape them. Wieden Kennedy is one of the largest indie ad agencies in the world. They made their mark working on brands like Coca-Cola and Nike. That Just Do It tagline, they did that. Wieden Kennedy CEO Neal Arthur joins me today to talk about how he collaborates with his co-partner and the best way to deal with failure in such a subjective business. Let's just start with an understanding of Wieden Kennedy. Can you explain the scope of the company, when you get involved in campaigns, and kind of how deeply involved you are with companies?
Sure. We're about 1,700 people worldwide. We've got 10 offices around the world. But at the basic level, I kind of run the business side of things. I'll use air quotes. But my partner, Carl Lieberman, is the CCO, and he kind of has two votes, and I have one. So Dan kind of created the company so that it was always going to be creatively led. He wanted every decision to be ultimately determined by through the creative filter and then obviously creative people.
How do you make decisions when you have someone who is an equal? What is it like in meetings when you guys disagree? Do you have a process for this?
Our company's so unique in that it's creatively led.
Right.
You know, I think that it actually is really helpful because there's two of us, and we make mistakes all the time, but it does feel like your ability to kind of mitigate risk goes down a bit when you have two people.
Why does that mitigate risk?
Just because there's two people working through the problem. You know what I mean? And we're going back and forth all the time on how do we want to show up? Who are the types of companies we want to work with? All these things. And rather than it just be, a one-person show, you have point and counterpoint. And, there's a system of checks and balances that exist. You have two complementary perspectives. We're kind of never in conflict. Mm-hmm. We're always just kind of in debate.
Right.
And that debate is really important to the company because you want those perspectives.
How is AI changing your work, and how do you think it is changing how the ad industry works in general?
I think AI is an incredibly powerful tool. I think it's the most powerful sort of tool that we've ever seen in society. But it's still a tool. It's still a thing that's meant to augment creative ideas. I think it allows us to scale more efficiently. But I don't spend any time worrying about whether AI is going to take over for us as humans.
Well, how are you using it internally?
What's awesome is an idea that you have in your head that lives in the abstract can become real instantly in AI. And it's not to say that you're going to use those things out in the world, but it's a great way to kind of demo and to bring to life anything that exists in your head. That's an incredibly powerful thing. So I think I'm actually, again, really optimistic about it.
One of the things I've seen you talk about in other interviews is this idea, even just of Wieden Kennedy, of how you use your founders to be able to guide your business. And a quote that I loved was you talk about going from Buddha to Buddhism. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. I mean, so we've been incredibly fortunate. Dan and Dave were the best founders you could ask for. And I don't say that just, in a light way. I think what they did that was so powerful is instead of creating a successful advertising agency that won awards or whatever, their whole intention was to create a space for what they said misfit toys, for creative, odd shaped characters. They've just created space for people to kind of show up as themselves, to kind of find their voice, to kind of actualize as people.
What is it like today when a big company says, please help us, to something that the world is talking about? You had an incredible showing at the Super Bowl.
Our business has fundamentally changed because now commercials and advertising are just a small portion of what the world sees. So what happens for us is we talk more about brands and less about ads now. We spend a lot of time talking about what your brand's about. What do you stand for? What are the things that you're into? What are the things that you're not into? What's your personality? What's your tone of voice? How do you want to show up in the world? And not just in the things that you make, but the things that people are talking about. What are the conversations that are happening in the social world that you feel like you should be engaged in versus those that you shouldn't? And so building a brand now is so much more expansive than just coming up with a couple of commercials, right? It has a much more sort of long sort of run up to like with figuring out like the whole sort of tapestry and canvas of a brand. And then from there, you can kind of figure out what's a Super Bowl ad look like.
So at the beginning, it's almost therapy. Let's break you down and understand what you're all about before you even start talking about it. How do you have that conversation about where you think the brand or the company is versus what they internally believe about themselves?
Well, that's the hardest part. So, oftentimes you have clients who are coming in and they can either feel insecure about where they are because there's so much going on in the world, or you have clients that feel like their thing is perfect. It's the perfect child and there are no flaws, right? And in either case, I think our thing is, particularly as Wieden, is to be really honest about where they stand. And sometimes that's to give them a shot of confidence to say, no, you're actually really awesome. There's tons of people who love you. Ignore the YouTube comments, and really lean into what makes you great. And then and other times it's saying, hey, listen, I know that you think your thing is perfect, but like what actually makes you interesting is maybe some of the flaws. We're always just trying to get rid of any sort of corporate sort of veneer and get to a thing that feels human and realistic and honest. Going to work together to have enough confidence to be honest about what we are and what we're not. Then that it's going to always lead to something that has a better chance of resonating in culture.
And what if companies want to change? What if they come to you? So I'm going to give you an example from my own life, which is years ago when we first started getting into content on LinkedIn, we were like, oh, how do we get into the market? We know this is where we want to be. And you would bring in outside firms and they would say, you're a job site. This is what LinkedIn, this is what you're seen as. Yeah. And it's like, well, we see ourselves as being something different. And I found it to be a frustrating conversation to be like, I know that's where we are today, but we want to get here. I need you to like take this jump with me.
Well, I mean, I think, it's all based in truth. So I think the fact that that's, in your example, that's where the vision that you had and that's where you wanted to go makes it true. And so I would spend less time assessing where you are.
Got it.
And I'd spend more time understanding why it's interesting to you to be, to play a larger role in content creation, and what you'd like to be in 10 years, and then we'd start to build a brand around that. So I think you're just always trying to anchor on something that feels true. The business of building brands is one that's future oriented. Yeah. You're always like, I think that's the most exciting thing about what we do is we're always building what could be, versus kind of reveling in what is.
And do you push companies when they come to you and they're like, this is what we want to do? You're like, you could be bigger or you could think more?
For sure. I think that's what we're doing 90% of the time.
Really?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think it's one of the most interesting things, and it happens a lot of times, particularly with founder-led companies. They're so entrenched in kind of what they've made, and it's been very an exercise of love, but also one that's very sort of like vertical. And then when you sit and listen to them, they have a much bigger ambition about kind of changing the way the travel works or whatever the thing is. And you go, well, that's the thing I get excited about is what your dreams are of what you'd like to become and how the world should change. That's oftentimes far more interesting than what the product that you're putting out in the world today.
It's so interesting. We just recently had Patrice Louvet, who's the CEO of Ralph Lauren here. And one of the things he talked about was the brand was struggling. And in order to be able to grow it again, the first thing he did was turn to Ralph Lauren and was like, what's your vision? Yeah. And he painted this vision of, we're in the dreams business. We need to create dreams. And out of that, they rethought the whole brand. Totally. So to your point, like going to the founder and be like, tell us why you started this business again and what vision you held on to. We're going to go back to that, and that's where we're going to grow from.
Oh, I can't tell you how many times the answers are in the origin story. Really? Yes, absolutely.
I love that.
I just because I think businesses tend to go from inspiration to operations really quickly, and I think that if you can go back to like why this thing started, it's almost always true even later on in the maturation of that company.
Right. We often hear about all of your successful campaigns, but I know people learn a lot from failures and mistakes. What's it like inside the firm, and how do you talk to employees when something goes wrong or it doesn't land, or client's unhappy?
Things in our business, things go wrong every day. I mean, because it's such a subjective business. You try to keep it in perspective. It's just advertising. I mean, so I think that's helpful actually to remind each other that pressure doesn't lead to better outcomes. So what we're oftentimes trying to do is protect people from the pressure that we might be getting from wherever. And if you can do that, then it frees people, liberates people to be able to kind of take risk and to put something on the wall that isn't the safe choice.
Yeah.
That's what you're always trying to do. So we're not afraid to have bad meetings. We say this to clients all the time. We really value bad meetings. If we're only having good meetings, it's because we're sharing things with you that you expect. And we need the space to be able to share things with you that you didn't. And if it feels like we have the wrong intention, that's different than just that we put something on the wall that you didn't like. It's really important to have the client dynamic, the trust and the partnership, that we can put things up there that you may not like, that you didn't expect. And then from there, it's crazy. I think you learn more from bad meetings, I'm again using quotes, than you do from good ones.
And would you talk more about this idea of protecting people from pressure? Because I know this is something that is important in the creative industry, but my guess is it's sort of important everywhere, is people don't do their best when they are feeling beaten up. But you do want them to understand that there are pressures. These are deadlines and they have to take it seriously. And you want them, I would assume, feeling like there are stakes here.
I mean, and this may be controversial. I don't feel like it's advantageous for people to feel pressure in most parts of the company. I think we'd much rather people feel like they've got the ability to take some swings. I don't want to talk about deadlines and how important it is. I just don't think that adds any value. I've never seen an idea get better because a creative was told, if this isn't awesome, then we're going to get fired.
Right.
So I think we expect senior people to be able to kind of manage that pressure.
Absorb the hit. Don't let everyone else feel it.
And not let anyone else feel it. Our best teams, our best leaders are that's what they do. They deal with that pressure. And then everyone else feels like they're having a great time. I don't think it's helpful for a company to be always in a position of fear or trying to act responsible, because our good ideas never come from that.
Right. Well, Neal, this has been terrific. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Such a pleasure.